Okay, good evening. Now, one thing that is very important is the concept of how can we be able to analyze our data, especially when we are students undertaking our postgraduate studies. That is the center of this our course. We intended to run it for around 7 days. And just before that, we are asking ourselves, before we can be able to start analyzing data, what are the point of reference? What do we refer to? So we have a number of documents that at least we need often to refer to when we are in the process of this journey of collecting data and finally analyzing. Now, one such document is the so-called questionnaire. It is what we want to go over briefly. The design of the questionnaire, because actually what we are going to analyze is this questionnaire. But before that, for the data analysis, because we are talking about data analysis, we are talking about data interpretation, and then we are also talking about discussion of the key findings. These are done in chapter 4, and sometimes other universities, they require discussion of the key findings to be done in chapter 5. But regardless of where it is placed, because there are two schools of thought as far as data analysis is concerned. Others propose that the chapter 4 of our research work only need to be data analysis, and perhaps a bit of the interpretation of the same. But when we go to chapter 5, then we can be able now to present the discussion of the key findings. Other schools of thought says that chapter 4 should contain data analysis, and remember that analysis is done elsewhere in a software and then being imported, so that we do analysis, we do interpretations, and then we do discussion of the key findings just in the same chapter. So we shall look at those avenues. There is no difference. It's only a matter of format where we are putting what and then when. Now, I normally have a briefing that when we are going to set out to do that analysis, we have what we call our key core points. Our core points, our source documents. So what are these source documents? They are point of reference. As we shall be doing our data analysis, we continuously going to refer to some documents. And these documents are what we are calling as the source document to data analysis. One of it is the so-called problem statement of the research. Now, the problem statement is very key because it is the reason, it is the rationale, it brings the justification why we are conducting the study. Now, any finding that we shall analyze, even if it is an issue of we are trying to analyze gender composition of the respondent, once we arrive at the fact that 60% were female and 40% were male, the first thing that we need to do is to look at that particular finding. What meaning can we be able to get from that vis-a-vis the problem statement? Is it something justifying the problem statement, or is it contrary to the problem statement, or problem statement was not capturing aspect of gender disparities? Most of the social science studies, we expect to capture the element of gender. And when we are going to analyze our data, we need to report on how many male were affected by the project and how many female were affected by the project. Equally, we may be interested in the number of old men and the children are the same children who are affected by the some particular project. So we shall not just talk about lump sum in terms of we reached 400 or we reached 15. And that's why every point that we shall be arriving at in our analysis stage, we need to compare it with the content of what is in the problem statement. Is it justifying the scenario in the problem statement? How is it at least contributing towards that? That is what we are calling as data interpretation. When you try to compare the findings with what we call the problem statement, That is what you're calling as data interpretation. But when we now try to compare the findings with the literature review, then that is what you're calling as discussion of the key findings. Now, if you look at the process or the steps that we are taking when we're doing that analysis, it tells you that if you can be even more creative to come up with your questionnaire before you even generate what you call your literature review and even your problem statement, then it simply means by the time you're going to do your literature review will be answering the questions in the questionnaire. Actually, the literature reviews will be answering the content of what is in the questionnaire. If I ask a question like trying to survey whether the water points at our public schools, there is always water in the taps throughout the week. I'm looking at the frequency of water being at the taps. I'm looking at whether at the taps, the children are capable of washing their hands, and there is also good detergents there. If that is what is in my questionnaire, then in the literature review must also capture that content. Something must be addressed in the literature review concerning in schools at developing nations. What is the frequency of going to a tap and finding that children after visiting latrines can be able to clean their hands? Such that when I'm going to report on that same finding, I will compare it vis-a-vis the literature review. I will state that this is the status quo, but then the following people also found the same. They are also bringing the justification for the same. Discussion of the key findings. It's very important for us to look at that one of the source documents we have talked about is the literature review, also the problem statement. Equally, where do we get these questions that we are asking the respondents in our questionnaire? We normally get them from the indicator, which simply means you must also refer to what you call our conceptual framework. Because that conceptual framework is where we are going to get the indicator, where we shall coin the questions that we shall give the respondents to fill for us. Okay, then it means therefore that our most important source document for our data analysis is the questionnaire. And today we will just want to go briefly onto the concept of the Likert Scale questionnaire, because these are form of very frequent types of questions that students normally adopt when they are doing their surveys for the sake of writing your thesis or dissertation or the project. So where did Likert Scale come from? Likert Scale actually was discovered by this gentleman called Francis Likert, who was a psychologist, an American psychologist. He was using it to assess what he called the attitude of employees, attitude of customers concerning the services that is being offered by a company. So the original plan of Likert Scale was to be able to assess, it's like a psychometric test, to be able to assess attitude of employees after experiencing a service, attitude of customers after experiencing a service by a company or even a supermarket. So he came up with this Likert Scale in 1932. But after him, there has been a lot of discussion. So what is it that we call Likert Scale? Look at, for this instance, you have, I prefer working from home. Perhaps this is the only question that you have given the candidates to fill for you after the COVID-19. Most of the companies decided to go and work at home. So now look at this question. I prefer working from home. Okay, strongly I disagree, 1. Then 2, disagree. Then 3, neutral. And then 4, agree. And then 5, strongly agree. Now what we are looking at here is that these responses it starts from the level of disagreement. The number 1 and number 2 can simply be combined to tell us that these people disagree. And then number 4 and 5 can also be combined to tell us that they agree, which simply means we can condense the 5 Likert scale so that it becomes dichotomous response of agree and disagree. Now, the question itself here is a positively worded question. When a question is positively worded, then the range of 1 up to 5, 1 gets the negative ones. They strongly disagree, we give it 1 for positively worded questions in our Likert scale. Now, strongly agree will be given 5. But if we have negatively worded questions in our questionnaire in form of Likert scale, then we change the reverse. Look at what is now happening. This is a negatively worded question. I don't prefer working from home. 1 now is going to be given strongly agree, while 5 now is going to be given strongly disagree. Take note of that, especially when you are going to frame your questions. Okay. 1 may ask me, where do you get these questions that we put in the Likert scale? These are components of our indicators in our conceptual framework. And sometimes you may be dealing with, especially in projects, where our indicators, we coin them from what we call standard indicators. Standard indicators that have been developed by the UNDP, World Health Organization, especially when I'm dealing with a project in health. We also, and even water, sanitation, and hygiene, we have standard indicators of measuring what you call water, sanitation and hygiene programs. Now, sometimes we're dealing with a project that perhaps we don't have standard indicators. Then where do we get them? Where do we get this question? Now, we go back to the previous studies and try to look at what various authors have tried to put in coin with regard to how did they measure that particular variable? Yeah, even your method of measuring the same variable will not differ with what the rest of other scholars have already done, because research is done systematically. There's some standard of doing it. So we must be able to confirm. And that's why anytime that we have found something, we need also to refer to, is it something that we are finding for the first time, or authors also had similar findings? And that is clearly what we are discussing in the discussion of the key findings. So let's move slightly down. Let's move down. So now look at, after the invention of Likert scale to measure what you call level of agreement or disagreement of a sentiment, of a survey of employees, a survey of customers, or even tourists. After they are leaving, at the point of exit, we need to give them this Likert scale question so that at least they tell us the services that we as the country is offering. And they are willing also to go and bring their friends to come and find the same experience. Now, by that alone, we can be able at least to see some of the things we need to change, because our interest is to retain, get referrals, and improve what we call the number of visitors that comes into our country. And therefore, the very, very people who have visited us, at the end of exit, at least we need to give them a questionnaire so that they fill for us. And from that, we can be able now to see what's supposed to be modified. What can we do better, at least to make our country be a destination of choice for tourists. So that is one thing that is very, very important. Now, after this level of agreement, now we have extended the Likert scale so that we can also measure other elements, not just agreement. So we can measure what we call the frequency. Now, when we use the frequency, perhaps we are talking about the frequency by which people, after visiting latrines, they can be able to wash their hands. So we can look at always, often, sometimes, rarely, and never. And this is only, yes, this is a scale. This is a scale. Remember, 5 is given to be always. That is the highest level under frequency. And that only happens especially when we have what we call positively worded sentiments. Quality is also another parameter that we can rate in Likert scale, like excellent, good, fair, poor, and very poor. Where very poor now is given 1, and then excellent is given to be 1, given to be a 5. Especially when you are a teacher like us, we are marking script of candidates. After marking those scripts, at least we can be able to rate these candidates into some level, very poor, poor, fair, good, and excellent. Okay, then we also have importance. Very important, important, moderately important, slightly important, or unimportant. Then likelihood, definitely, probably, possibly, probably not, or definitely not. These are exactly the levels of scales that we can be able to use. Just beside what we call the level agreement, we have currently extended what we can put in a Likert scale format to refer to frequency, quality, importance, likelihood. And in likelihood, we can have even almost always true, usually true, occasionally, usually not true, or rarely. Those are all the scales that you can be able to use to measure the likelihood of something happening. Yes, the likelihood that if I go home, I'm going to find A, B, C, D. You can be able to predict, because remember, this is a possibility that we are using this particular scale to predict. We are predicting the service, we are predicting the likelihood of occurrence, we are predicting the importance, the quality, we are predicting the frequency and agreement. I don't know whether somebody has raised the hand. No one has raised the hand. So now, let's, yes?
No, sorry, it was me, but you kind of answered it while you were talking.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Then let's move to the next level. Thank you. Analyzing Likert scale. This is a very special area where there's been a very intensive debate among scholars from the time that Likert scale was discovered. Initially, Likert scale is a categorical data. That is something that must come onto you. And that's why when I initially talked about whether I don't know whether I addressed here, when we are talking about variables classification, that variables are classified into 2 broad domains. The first one is the so-called numerical variables. Under numerical variables, we have 2 categories. The first one is called discrete variable. Now, a variable that actually comes in whole number, like for instance, the number of children you have. You can never tell us that you have 2.5 children. You can only tell us you have 3, you have 4, or you have 10. The number of cows. The cows are going to take the form of whole number. The amount of money in your account is going to be a whole number. Okay? So any response from the respondent that will take form of whole numbers or countables, we shall consider them as discrete variable. But any response that we only get from the respondent as a result of measuring using a certain tool, like measuring instruments, like we may have a thermometer, we are trying to measure the temperature. That particular result is a measurable quantity. So we call it a continuous variable. Okay. So we can measure humidity, height, even age is a continuous variable. Okay. So apart from what we call the numerical variable, the second category variable is categorical variables, which are subdivided into 3 categories, 3 subcategories. So the first category under that is the so-called, the first category is the so-called binary responses that are coming in paired response, like no or yes. Have you taken water today? What I expect from you is either no or yes. If you have actually taken water, you'll tell me yes. If you have not taken water, you will tell me no. You are going to test for a disease, COVID-19. you're waiting for your result. The doctor will come and will tell you the result. And there is no any other second or third choice for the response you're waiting from the doctor. It's either positive or negative. Those are the only options that we have. That is what we're calling as binary response. Sometimes we can have a 5 Likert scale, like what I was trying to introduce to you, but we condense them, we transform them so that they become what we call binary. The response now becoming agree or disagree, especially when we are assessing the level of agreement. What people normally know, why I'm expounding this, what people normally know is that Likert scale is for assessing level of agreement or disagreement. It's not only that, we can use it to assess these other elements like frequency, quality, importance, and likelihood. So we have now brought to you expanded view on what we call the Likert scale. And that's exactly what you need. And this is actually the ratings level. If it is frequency, this is the rating, always, often. But then you keep on interchanging them based on how you have formatted your question, because I've told you that questions can be positively worded sentiment or negatively worded sentiment. If it's a negatively worded sentiment, then you realize that something like strongly disagree becomes, will be given now the highest value, while the lowest value will be given to what we call strongly disagree. So something like that. There's some elements of changing, but then negatively worded sentiments in the Likert scales are not very common. What we find every day, especially in most of the journals we read, is that the sentiments are positively worded. That simply means now the concept of strongly agree takes the highest value, while the lowest value will be given to strongly disagree. Good. I was just talking about how do we analyze. So I'm giving what we call quotation from Jameson, 2004. Actually, I've given all the citations necessary to support what we are discussing today. Now, the response categories in the Likert scales have a rank order. That is the rule, that the responses are ranked, but the intervals between values cannot be presumed to L. Therefore, the mean and standard deviation for a Likert scale data is inappropriate for all ordinal data. This is Jameson's talking, 2004. He is telling us that whenever you have a Likert scale response, don't analyze them using mean and standard deviation. Just use mode and median as the best way to present your data. And the next thing is, if you want to use the graph, then use bar graph to present that particular response that you have already got. That is according to what you call Jameson. But you will find that a lot of other arguments have come forth with regard to this particular statement. Okay? But researchers have come to what you call consensus. They have said that, okay, let us take a Likert scale data as ordinal measurement. But when it comes to analysis, if we are going to transform the responses from the respondents, items from the respondent, so that we get the mean average of them, then with the mean, the result that we get when we calculate the mean, they will tend to be a continuous variable. And therefore, that brings the justification where we can use mean standard deviation to compute a Likert scale data. We are just going to see the examples of what I'm talking about, what I've raised, which simply means there's some exception to this rule. If I only have one question, and then I'm trying to assess the level of agreement of that particular question, I cannot go ahead and then compute the mean and standard deviation of that particular question. But in case I had said I want to combine 60 respondents' view concerning that particular sentiment, then I want to get the average view concerning each sentiment. I will get all the views of each person then divide by the number of people who participated in the survey, I will get the mean average. Because of that, I will not get an answer like 2 or 3 or 4. Strongly agree, or I will get an answer which is near something like 3.4, 3.6, something like that. Because of that, that particular answer that I've already got is a continuous variable. And if I go ahead, compute mean and standard deviation with that particular response, I've not done anything wrong. And when I move ahead from what you call descriptive statistics, I go to inferential statistics. Because of that I computed the mean average, I can now go ahead to compute, I can go ahead to run even parametric test statistics. So long as all the assumptions of parametric test statistics have been observed and have not been violated, I can use Likert scale to even run multiple linear regression. If not, if the assumptions are violated, then I cannot go ahead with parametric test statistics. I'm expected to look for non-parametric test statistics equivalent of the particular regression or correlation that I wanted to run. And that is the standard rule of handling what you call Likert scale data. Let's move forward. So that's why I'm asking this question. Should we run parametric test or non-parametric test? Now, what are these things that we are calling as parametric tests? Tests that require that the population where we took the data as a normal distribution. This normal distribution concept is a requirement in all our tests that we shall do. Tests which require they are with a higher statistical power. Now, for instance, when I come to correlation, we have two types of correlation. The first correlation is called person-product moment correlation. This is a correlation that requires that the population where we took the data from have a normal distribution. But it's like the non-parametric equivalent of this particular test of correlation is called ranked correlation. So in that one does not require population to have a normal distribution. This so-called concept of distribution, this is how to explain it in layman's language. I can be able to explain it in layman's language. Let me just bring in, create a new slide here, just to create illustration of what we mean by this particular correlation. Yeah, let me just distribution. We may have different kinds of distribution. Sometimes you may do a survey and ask the respondent one question about their attitude towards their manager. If he's a good person, and then you give them a scale of 1 to 5. The question is that the manager is very competent. Now, 1, strongly disagree. 2, disagree. 3, neutral. 4, agree. And then 5, strongly agree. We are trying to look at the competence of the manager in the eyes of the employees. Okay, if the manager has demonstrated a high level of competence in the eyes of the employees for a very long time, then what do I expect? I expect majority of the staff will give the manager strongly agree and then agree. But if the manager has demonstrated inept, that is not able to handle his functions well and rely so much in the eyes of the employees. And let me tell you, that is something that is very dangerous, because often the employees expect you to give direction. And in case you rely on them so much, they can even sabotage you just to reflect that you don't know what you're doing, so that you can be fired. So it's very much important that by the time you go up there to be in charge of people, you must be up to your game. You must be the one in charge of controlling all the processes. You understand them very, very well. And you can question those things that they're bringing forth. So if at all you already have high level of competence that we are trying to measure here, we expect a majority of the employees will give us strongly agree and agree going upwards. But if so long as you are not capable of handling your functions well, then we expect majority of the employees will give you 1 or 2. What does it mean? The answer, the result that we are going to get from you is going to be kneeling towards one particular direction. Let me see like this. Now, this particular answer is kneeling towards a given direction. Can somebody tell me it is kneeling towards the left or it is kneeling towards the right? This is the curve that we have drawn. Yeah. So this simply means that the majority of the respondents are, the employees are disagreeing with your level of competence. The employees are simply, majority of the employees disagreed with the statement that you have high level of competence. It simply means that the manager does not understand these core functions. So we are seeing a situation whereby the distribution is skewed towards the left. The concentration is towards the left. And remember, in number line, we start from 1, and then we go up to 5. So this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. So we expected a concentration. We expected a concentration of, if it is concentrated towards 2 and 1, it simply means they strongly disagree with the sentiment. So it is skewed. And this is the phenomenon you expect most of the instances when you conduct a Likert scale response. Since one thing before we can be able to give these particular people the questionnaire is the concept of ensuring that they experience homogeneous characteristics. They must be the same experience which we're trying to test. Here, what we are trying to test is employees that are like 400, but they have 1 manager. And we are trying to get their sentiment with regard to how they feel their manager is competent in delegating his or her core functions. So we expect these particular people, because all of them are reporting the same manager, they know whether they have a good manager who is competent in terms of the understanding or they don't have. So that's why you expect something like this. So often, this is what happens. In Likert scale responses, if the candidates filling these particular responses are not affected by the question, remember there is one of the disadvantages of Likert scale is that the candidate may be affected by the way you have framed the question. Yeah, that is a bias. Like recently, there is a survey that was conducted in Somalia, but you find that the people who are filling the question, perhaps they even never read the question. They were just ticking things that it was until now, the person that we were analyzing the data is when our eyes woke up. That is it the reality of what is happening in the ground. We realized that those people were just taking those things. There was nothing like any relationship with what is there and the findings that we are getting here. And it was going to bring a lot of challenge. Until now, we were forced at least to conduct an interview to justify so that we can alter the kind of responses that we had during what we call data analysis. But now, if it is positively skewed, then you are going to see something like this. Concentration will be from strongly agree and strongly disagree. We have positively skewed distribution. This is the phenomenon that you expect often, since the people we are trying to collect information from, they have similar experience. So you expect element of, but now the situation of parametric test statistics is saying that the data, the population, we expect a normal distribution, which simply means the concentration of a normal distribution will now look like this. Let me bring another slide here, so that at least we can be able at least to have. Now, a normal distribution will now be a situation whereby we have almost let me try to a situation whereby we have something like this. Now, if you look at this concentration being almost the same in both sides, then now we can say this almost near normal distribution. This is the condition for us to run parametric statistics like person product moment correlation. And then we have what we call ANOVA. We have t-test. All these are test statistics that require that my data set must have this kind of normal distribution. We have t-test, we have paired sample t-test, All these this is a requirement of them. And that's why we are saying that this particular kind of requirement is not normally very easy for you to get when you are dealing with what you call the Likert scale data. That's why we are trying to justify that Likert scale data is almost a greater level of percentage that it is an unparametric test. Immediately you collect data like this, you will fail not to get this normal distribution. But now we have modified, we have come up with techniques by which you can be able to get this normal distribution. And that's what I will be talking about later, how we can be able to modify our data set so that we get this normal distribution to run a parametric test statistic in our thesis, by ensuring that all those assumptions of these parametric test statistics have been observed. Okay, so let's continue. Guidelines to use Likert scale. If you compute the mean average for each questions, the answer you get tends to be a continuous variable like 4.23. It tests for normality, homoscedasticity, and assumptions are not violated. Then you can go ahead and choose statistical tests that support parametric test statistics. However, if the assumptions are violated, or if you have not computed the mean, you take the question the way it was direct from the respondent in terms of level of agreement, strongly agreed, that's what you have, then please don't go ahead to run mean, standard deviations and the things. Go direct to non-parametric test statistics. That is the rule. Okay. Test of hypothesis. Even here, we also test hypotheses. So what are the possibilities of us testing hypotheses in Likert scale? To test hypothesis with the Likert scale, these are what you're supposed to do. To test hypothesis, one must initially think carefully about the question you are trying to answer. Okay. Analysis of variance techniques include, which simply means if at all you are comparing two groups, these groups may not necessarily the groups that have been combined. If at all they are combined groups and all the assumptions for parametric tests have been observed, then definitely you can go ahead and run ANOVA or t-test or independent sample t-test. Those are we shall be looking at those ones one by one. But in case these are not, you are not dealing with a combined average of all the items in one particular variable, then you need to move to what you call Mann-Whitney test. This is opposite for independent sample t-test. And then Kruskal-Wallis test, which is like now a paired sample t-test, where we are just comparing one particular group by the other group. For instance, you realize that you are implementing a program, and then you have selected some particular people to be what you call the control group. With them, you will not give them the intervention. So the second group, you'll give what you call the intervention. Then after that, you want to compare what you call whether there's significant difference between the group that never had the project and the group that had the project. Now, in that case, we are going to run what you call the Kruskal-Wallis test in case we are dealing with what you call a non-parametric test statistics. But if you have 5 Likert scale and you decided to combine them, transform them so that they become agree or disagree, and 2 questions, you are just combining 2 of them, then please, you need to go and run what you call chi-square. Because that is the condition for running chi-square. The responses must be dichotomous. It must be yes or no, positive or negative. And these are very common, especially in medical statistics, biostatistics. Because majority of the responses we expect is either yes or no. A patient is either reacting to a drug or it's not reacting. So there is a lot of dichotomous responses. And that's why we are going for what you call chi-square test. You can use chi-square now to test what you call the hypothesis in the particular case, especially when you have what you call the Likert scale data. Let's move forward. Okay. Next is now the parametric equivalent. What is the rule? What is the rationale for us to run parametric test using a Likert scale? We are getting justification from what we call central limit theorem. This is a theorem that those who did a bit of mathematics was really there at the university level. Central limit theorem. It's what justifies us to be able now to run this. The analysis of variance, t-test, ANOVA, and regression result, especially multiple linear regression, all can be justified using what we call Likert scale, so long as the central limit theorem has been justified. Common mistakes. The first common mistake, avoid using extreme responses categories. You may find that now sometimes the respondents will try to avoid 1 or 5. You're telling them to rate the performance of your president, but then you're given a scale of 1 to 10, but then they're feeling that extreme they are trying to avoid. It's very common that they want to remain neutral. They don't want to go to this level of extreme. And that's why sometimes when we do what you call reporting, as you shall see, we may only report what you call the extreme values. We report the best and then the worst only. The middle ones we can ignore. And even now reporting about a neutral position is not even very nice, because a person who is undecided, why? Why is majority who are undecided? We need now to investigate so that we can report, justify that, but try as much as possible to avoid the concept of reporting neutral group in your interpretation. Just talk about the majority and then the lowest. But if you talk about majority, we need to know what is the significance of that majority. That is what is important, because what does the researcher interpret vis-a-vis problem statement concerning majority? They were 85%. So what? That must come out very clear, because that is the essence why we are conducting what you call the data analysis. Please don't read for us the table. That is a very grave mistake. At your level, I don't expect you're not doing the diploma the way the young boys down there are doing research. When they are exposed to research, even undergraduate for the first time, what they are supposed to do is read the table. They present the results in the table one by one and leave it like that. There's nothing at all with regard to what we call data interpretation. That's not what we expect from you. At the postgraduate level, you need to tell us something about that data set with regard to your problem statement. You must do for us what we call data interpretation. What are you getting out from that? Now, if I go and realize that majority are male, we must be able to connect. What about what you call affirmative action? Is it being applied? Okay, we are realizing the majority are male. What is bringing this male dominance? We must be able to connect that with the society where we are, so that we interpret it accordingly. That is what is happening in this our country. Most of those offices are like the particular survey I was telling you of that was done in Somalia. You realize that the female were almost 8%, and 92% were male. Now, it tells you where is the female? Where are they? Because if you are doing a survey among teachers and you are only able to get 8% of the sample size who are only female, that it tells you something about the education system in that place. Because now it's like girl-child education has not been given a priority. Yeah. So that is also a center where we need to focus on, so that we bring girls, because if we have very low teachers, girls teachers, then the future of our girl child is in problem, because now girls have some of the issues that they can only share well with the female teachers. But now you're finding that majority of those schools, we did the surveys were male. So it's, even if at all we are advocating for girl child education, there's a problem there because we don't have those girl teachers that can be an example even to them. Okay. So there are normally something that errors that are associated with the Likert scale. That is what we are trying to talk about here. How people perceive, how when they are feeling those questions. Some also try to go with the question, especially if it's a positively awarded question, they simply go to the extreme of taking 5. They agree. They agree based on the way the question has been formatted. Okay. So up to that, I have briefly the references that I will share with you on the Likert scale, but I want to go to what you call, I want to allow you some time, then I go into what you call improving quality of a Likert scale data. Because before we give this Likert scale to the respondent, please, you must be able to take care of this quality standards that I'm going to talk about one by one. And then we are going to assess them through what you call our practicals. So I want to allow you time for what you call interaction with my oral presentation. Then after that, I can go to the practical section of my presentation. So we are welcome for what you call the any question concerning my oral presentation. So after that, we move to the practical section where we are going to take you through process of improving quality of a Likert scale data before you give them to the respondents, the so-called pilot test. Okay, any question? Yes. Can I get anything that is not clear? Yes, Tammy. Tammy, you can start for us the forum.
Ask in the chat. Okay, so I was maybe wondering about the if you could just scroll up a little bit, I forgot which slide it was. No, I remember. I'll ask it. Okay, yeah, I think it's this one. The questions.
Yes.
That basically, maybe my question is how to reframe. Okay, no, let me think about the question properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and another person who has a question, please, as Tammy is going to reframe the question further. Any question from the participants?
Okay, I remembered now. Is it always a necessity to do a pilot? I'm asking because on my side, I'm on the I help out at an NGO, so I volunteer at an NGO, and
Yes.
And that's not necessarily academic research, but nonetheless it's research. So would it be appropriate in that situation?
Okay. Be it that it's an NGO, it is the academic one. It's very important that we conduct a pilot. Why? Do we need to conduct pilot? You are just going to see when we come to practical, the rationale for pilot. Because now it is the pilot that will make us go to our data analysis with some level of confidence on the analysis part. Remember, we are doing pilot to improve the structure of our questionnaire before it goes there to the field. Sometimes you may realize that you have one question where majority of the respondents are likely not going to fill it. Why do you retain that question to go to the field where you are going to give the questionnaire to almost 2,000 respondents? Why can't you be able to scrutinize what is likely be the problem? Is it a format by which the question was framed, or there's something that perhaps was not done right? Why is it that this particular question, majority are escaping to fill it? That question needs to be modified before finally it is taken to the field. That is the essence of the pilot. And one thing that is important is that sometimes we realize that the pilot, when we do a pilot, and then we go ahead, use the software to assess the pilot result, we will find even the questions that ought to have not been included in the questionnaire. There are some questions that needs to be deleted out because they are not contributing to us answering the objectives. We are going to find out. And that's where we do a pilot, so that the very questions that are not contributing to answering our objective, they were perhaps not framed well, or they were an error for them to be included in that particular item of the objective. We shall detect them and delete them out before finally we check the questionnaire to the field. That's why the decision of pilot must be done. You cannot be able to do, because remember, we have various ways of testing what you call validity and reliability. I normally prefer to start with what you call validity. So after the validity, you will find that for the questions that are not supposed to be in the questionnaire and you included, the validity test will eliminate all of them. Then after that, we remain with specific questions that even if we take to the field, we collect data on those very questions. When we come to do data analysis, we shall not find instances whereby we have majority of cases, we have non-significant relationship. Will be reduced by that because our question passed what you call that quality test. So a pilot test is a quality stage. It assists us to enhance the level of quality of our questionnaire. Because this is a very important instrument. Is the instrument for collecting what you call the data. And that's why you'll find, like, I have one of my professors who told me that majority of these surveys that sometimes is being given, what he does first is the pilot, because once he has already done the pilot, he may even refuse not to go and do the main result if the finances are not there. The reason why you have to do the pilot, you yourself and the researcher, is to be able to grab the much you can concerning the subject that you are going to do the study. You don't need to rely on the people who are going to collect for you the data. After the pilot, you already know what is happening there. You can sit down and even scrutinize. By the time you do a pilot and then you go and do what you call interviews. Yeah. Remember, you must be able to use what you call mixed method for this comprehensive study. Like even if at all you're doing PhD, you're doing research for the NGO organization, you will be compelled to use what you call mixed method approach. Therefore, the first is to be able to collect data using the questionnaire. Once you've already collected data using questionnaire, you must analyze that particular data so that you get the views of the feedback. And this so-called questionnaire design stage must be appropriate, must not have any error. And I will do for you several experiments when we go to the practical, where I bring an odd question and include it with one of the objectives. Then I run what you call the validity test. You'll find the system will detect, the system will tell us that this particular question is not part of this particular question, and therefore it needs to be deleted out. So our system has a way by which questions that ought to have not been included will be detected, and they will knock them out, will expurge them out from the very questions that we are taking to the final field. If you ignore this step of pilot test, what it means is that any error that are inherent into the questionnaire will go to the field, to the respondent, the way it is. And the respondent will fill it, and then you will bring it back. But look at, is it assisting us to answer the objective? No. It is making us not to answer the objective because it is drawing up backwards. So a question may be drawing, and this is the main reason why sometimes you find students do analysis, especially the student, they do analysis because they are the ones that are so much concerned about testing relationship. They find that there's non-significant relationship almost in every variable that they are doing. Kumbe, it is a problem of something was not done at an initial stage. There is something that was wrong, and they were not proper screening was not done during the time that it was supposed to be done before data is collected. Why do we need to go with a perfect questionnaire? Is that the process of collecting data consumes time, it is some money, and therefore there's no need for us to. Now look at this. Most of the people, even like the guys who are doing PhD or doing what, they don't do pilots. And after that, they come up with the questions that perhaps were not supposed to be included in the analysis. So what do we do? If it passed through me, the first thing that I have to do is to run to assess the question's contribution to answering the objective by testing for what you call the validity. If I do that particular test, I will be able to detect the questions that went to the field, but they were not supposed to be part of the, because they are going to make me have misleading result in my data analysis. What will I do? I will now knock those particular questions out before I can be able to give reports on those particular variables. Because I can't include them, because when I include them, definitely they will draw me back. Those are the questions that will make me be having a lot of non-statistical significant relationship. Immediately I remove them, you'll find that my data set start behaving very, very well. Yeah. So if you have ever done analysis, you'll find some of the data that you are analyzing, they are not making a lot of sense until you are wondering whether, where did the error come from? And you don't know where the error come from because there's something, a stage that you bypassed. So pilot test is like almost compulsory for every research that you have to do, because it's a stage where we are trying to improve the quality of our questionnaire. We are interested in enhancing the quality of, we remember the concept of garbage in, garbage out. Let's go to the field with type of questions that are passed quality test. They will be assist us to answer exactly the objectives we want to address. So that's why we are doing this pilot study. It's not the overall study, it is just to be assisted, to be able to assess the quality of the questions we are taking to the field. Yeah, and that's why you find, if you look about the validity, sometimes you look at what you call that expert's judgment. You look at the experts, you give them those questions, they go over each and every question, and they even do some ratings upon each and every question. Yeah. Then after that, the questions also to be taken to the software. Then we are also assessing the time a respondent even took answering the question. Is it so difficult for them to answer? All those needs to be analyzed, because if the questionnaire, the respondent takes a lot of time, they don't have that time to spend. So we can be able to at least reduce the content of the questions we are taking to the field. Look at all those, can only be examined if at all you have done the pilot test. So that the questions that where they're leaving blank, it may be a mistake that you did by answering putting a question that is like intimidating the respondent, like a question about age. A question about age, the only people who appreciate their age so much are male. Ladies do not want at least to expose their age to the public. So what will happen? If you put it as a continuous variable, where you expect a lady to write for you that I'm aged 52 years, forget, they will escape that question. They will not fail it. So what does it mean? Transform that particular question now. If you find that the pilot has revealed that they left that particular question blank, then now change that question from just writing it that they write the age like 45, now put it in a category. You will give them the same question and you'll find that all of them are going to fail it because they know you don't know their age. It's only a range. It is now a categorical variable where you're talking about 40 to 49 and then 50 to 6. So they will just pick the age because they know you don't know. It's a matter of a range. So they feel more comfortable to answer such questions. Now, if that is the case that the pilot revealed, then you modify. But if the pilot has revealed that no one cares about their age, they write their age. Once you have revealed that they write, you need to investigate whether they write accurately or they are just pretending. If they are cheating on that particular question, then you also modify it. But if in case they are writing, they are truthful, then definitely what you do, you just leave that particular question the way it is. So pilot is supposed to assist us, grab what is happening. And remember the rules of pilot. One rule is that you take 10% of the sample size. So if the sample size is 800, then 10% of 800 is going to be around 80. That is what we shall use. Next rule is we don't use the people who are going to fail for us, who are going to participate in our survey. So if, for instance, we were talking about a group in a city A, then we use the same people like teachers. You're doing a survey among teachers. Then we can now use teachers in another city, not the same city where we are going to do the study. That is the second rule about conducting pilot. It must be done with people with a similar experience, but not the ones who are going to do the initial study, who are going to participate in the initial study. You cannot participate in the pilot and then same time going to participate in the regional study. That is the second rule, how we conduct what you call the pilot. Yeah. So 10% of sample size. Number two, people of similar experience, but not the ones who are going to participate in the survey. Yeah, that is very, very important that you take into consideration. And above all, let the pilot be done by the researcher. Let the researcher take time to go and conduct what you call the pilot. I sometimes even advise that the most difficult process in the research may be the stage where you are setting your questionnaire. If you can set the questionnaire and ensure that the questionnaire goes to several hands for rereading, proofreading, and you conduct even the pilot test before you even start everything, and the questions are well set with clear indicators measuring all the objectives that we are going to study. Remember, if you have that and you have even done everything, when you are going to do what you call even develop your literature review. What is literature review? It's just a review of what other authors have done concerning the same variables that I'm going to study. Remember, by the time I'm going to come up with my literature review, I'm simply answering the content of my questionnaire. Now, when I behave like that, that's when that particular literature review will assist me to be able to do what you call discussion of the key findings of my study. Otherwise, this particular kind of literatures they write in literature that does not even consider the questionnaire itself. You can never even use that particular literature to do discussion of the key finding. By the time you're doing the discussion of the key finding, you have to go back to do literature review again, so that you find authors that at least also agreed with the same findings that you have got, because the way they did that one was completely non-consideration with what you call they poorly done. It cannot assist in doing our data analysis, because remember, literature review is part of the data analysis. It's a source document to data analysis. It supports the data analysis process because it is where we get how to discuss the discussion of the key findings. Now, problem statement is part of the data analysis. It is where we do what you call interpretation of our study findings. Yeah. So if it is also not done well, then there's nothing that we shall relate to. Our findings will not have anything that we can copy so that we relate with, because it was not properly done. Those are two sections of our research. that are very, very important because they are part of our, that just like questionnaire, literature review, problem statement. They are sections that support us to be able to do our data analysis comprehensively well. Okay. So that becomes
Mr. Peter, I
yes.
sent you a message on the chat box.
Okay, let me read the message, Kenneth. The message is understanding of its definition and application is not clear. What is not clear here is the parametric and non-parametric test. Okay, thank you, Kenneth. Now, Kenneth, what we are saying is this, that we normally have some different test statistics. And these test statistics are grouped majorly into two broad categories. The first is parametric test. Now, what we want to answer here is, what are parametric tests? Yeah, let me close this up. What are parametric tests? And what do they require so that a test can qualify to be parametric? Now, ordinarily, if we ignore the concept of Likert scale, parametric tests were designed to be used with what we call numerical variables. They have a higher statistical power. We can rely on the results that we are getting from parametric tests better than the way we are relying on the results that we are getting from the other side. But one thing that is very unique in the process of our statistic is that the major requirement for all parametric tests is that data that we are using to analyze originated from a population, with normal distribution. This is the central requirement for all parametric tests, that the data set we are using to analyze originated from a population with a normal distribution. There is some equality. The distribution is normal. What I was trying to explain the other side. Besides this normal distribution assumption that is required for parametric tests, we also require what you call homoscedasticity. This is the assumption we are calling as equivariance. I will illustrate this using what we call scatter graph. The coordinate points between X and Y are evenly distributed across X, Y axis domain. They are evenly distributed, which simply means the space in between. This is what we are referring to. Let me just draw a small graph here to illustrate. This is what we are referring to. If this is the scatter graph, then if this point is here, another one is going to be here. This one is going to be here. This one is here. This one is going to be here. These are what we're calling a scatter. They are evenly distributed across. They are forming an equal pattern from X and Y axis. This is X axis. Then this is the y-axis. So if you use the scatter graph to plot the coordinates between x and y coordinates, they are the scatter are evenly distributed. So that is a requirement of homoscedasticity. Okay. And then finally, we have, these are the most two important for us to be able to run parametric test. However, we also have other like linearity, linear relationship, because we don't use curves, especially when we are running this. Why do we use this? Because remember, this particular test that we are going to do, we are using it for prediction purposes. We are saying that now, at what point of x will we be able to obtain y? Yeah, so one assumption is that the relationship, they must be linear. The x-y coordinates needs to have a linear relationship to support our prediction. Yeah, so if it's a curve, non-linear, then definitely we can, the only thing that we can do before we can run this our statistics to be able to transform the non-linear relationship. Yeah, if the curve is like this, we need to transform this particular curve so that it can have a linear relationship by taking both sides. We take log of x and also take log of y. That is under transformation, which we also do using our SPSS. We take log of x and log of y so that you can transform this particular curve so that you can now have the relationship can now be linear. And if at all the relationship becomes linear, then at least now we just treat it and we will be able to run these statistics like the parametric test statistics. Yeah, because now we have already required. So these elements of transformation is very common, especially with our software, that you can hardly do that analysis well without embracing that transform the variable. Yeah, you are the analyst. You are the one who knows what you want to report to the field. You also know this particular variable. You have even done what you call the literature review to know exactly the relationship, how other authors found. So we have powers at the same time to be able to transform and report exactly what the exact findings in this case. So parametric tests require that my data originated from a population with what you call a normal distribution. And the homoscedasticity simply emphasizing the equivariant. Actually, wherever data has already met this normal distribution assumption, homoscedasticity will automatically be observed in that particular case. But even if it is not observed, we have a way out by which we can be able to transform our data so that it can meet that particular homoscedasticity assumptions of parametric test statistics. Yeah. So examples of this parametric test statistic is like product moment correlation. The normal correlation that you know, the product moment correlation is an example of parametric test statistic. We have what we call t-test. We have independent sample t-test. We have paired sample t-test. We have ANOVA, one-way ANOVA, two-way ANOVA, three-way or four-way ANOVA. All those are part of parametric test statistic. They require you to have a normal distribution on your data set. And then this homoscedasticity assumption is also a requirement in all those particular test statistics that you want to run. But in case a data is not having this normal distribution assumption, then we go to what you call non-parametric. Every parametric test statistic has non-parametric equivalent. It's like its opposite. They have like that. But that one is we'll be knowing very well when we are in the practical. Like for instance, I just talked about Mann-Newton test, and then I also talked about Kruse-Kallis test. These are, the Mann-Newton is like independent sample t-test. The parametric part of it is independent sample t-test. The non-parametric one is now Mann-Newton test. Then when I talk about Kruse-Kallis is like now paired sample t-test for parametric. So non-parametric equivalent. So like even regression, if I talk about any part of a regression, it has non-parametric equivalent for it. If these assumptions are not met, we just simply go to non-parametric component of it, and then we run and interpret the result, and we can be able to write our findings very well. So that is what normally happens, how you can differentiate. You can only differentiate them immediately you go to practice, and then you can be able now to test that you have failed not to have parametric, a normal distribution has failed. Then we now argue out what is the non-parametric equivalent for this particular test I wanted to run. Then you pick that one. Now, when you come to regressions, like binary logistic regression is a non-parametric equivalent, non-parametric one. We have also ordinal logistic regression, nominal logistic regression, or probability models. All these non-parametric tests, they more emphasize so much about the probability design. Like, for instance, we have chi-square. We talk about that time that if at all we put the response into 2, yes, no, for both dependent and independent variable, we can simply use what we call chi-square to be able to test the difference, whether there's significant difference between those two variables. For instance, you are comparing gender and level of education, not level of education, gender, yes. And we can talk about gender and possibility of joining business or not joining business, decision of joining or not joining. So if those are the two variables that we are trying to compare, and we are trying to look at whether gender is a factor in making and in affecting people's decisions in joining business, then you simply now go and run what you call our chi-square. But if the chi-square, if it happens that the sample size is too small, like 10, then you cannot run a chi-square when the variables are dichotomous. Yes, no, yes, no. Now we go and run what we call Fisher's test. It's only run, it's like a chi-square, but only run when the sample size is too small. So now look at that. We are actually simply making decision based on the kind of response that we are receiving from the respondent. That is what is going to be assist us to be able to arrive at the decision of which test am I going to run. That is very, very important, because how will you going to choose? What are you going to choose if you don't know how you are, what will guide you to make a choice of statistical test to use to report, to give your finding? So that is why it is very, very important for us to differentiate between these parametric and non-parametric test statistics. Okay, so I think that is Kenneth. So I think we can move slightly to our practical sense. Just an illustration on the same. Especially what I want to illustrate is, I want to illustrate a question. I have a questionnaire which we have done. So we want to test whether those questions, exactly the way they are, is the way they need to go to the respondent, or some of the questions need to be deleted. That is exactly what we want to test now. So I can simply now leave the PowerPoint, and then I go to data. Okay, so that's exactly what I want now to choose the data. Yes, so I've reached the data already. So I'm here. Okay, this is the data. This data was collected by a postgraduate student. The sample size was 400,000, no, 400. And since the sample size is 400, therefore, we were to do a pilot with, I think, 40 respondents. Yeah, there are 40 respondents. So briefly, when you get a questionnaire, it's already been filled like this. One thing that you need to know is to be able to understand what were they, what are the questions that we were trying to answer. What it simply means, therefore, immediately you have a data set like this, you need to check about the questionnaire and also need to check about this column of the questionnaire. This is like the questionnaire. The SPSS is divided into two windows. We have variable view and also we have data view. Now the variable view is like the questionnaire itself. This is where we are bringing in what you call these questions were now important, brought in. Now look at the first question. The first question is testing about gender of the respondent. And then look at the way it has been keyed. Gender is keyed in terms of male and female. They have not provided for what you call the people in the middle category, the three currently. Most of the statistics we have including gender, no longer a binary response. Age of the respondents, you can look at how they were categorized in terms of age. This is the way I told you, when you put age like this, at least you will realize that majority of people will be able to respond, all of them. They will not leave a lot of blanks, but if you tell them just to write their age, sometimes you don't get exact feedback. You will find a lot of missing values in that particular question. So if this particular pilot test has revealed that this question, majority of them left it blank, then we go and modify that particular question so that it can be more friendly to avoid when I go to collect data where people will leave it blank. So look at the essence of pilot. We are using pilot to modify our questionnaire so that we improve the quality level. Okay. So I go briefly into just reading these questions, what they are or not. And then immediately after that, at least I go back to testing for what you call, the two tests we do to pilot is called validity test and reliability test. So the validity test and reliability test, I normally prefer in me. Most of the reports I've been seeing, they normally start with reliability. But to me, I prefer, I begin with what you call validity. But then something that is interesting that I've not told you here is this. These test statistics that we are doing using software to test, we only do it on questions that were Likert scale. Only questions that are Likert scale is where I will use this software to be able to assess validity and reliability. Like this, my questions, several questions were not Likert scale because these are PhD research. And as much as possible, the guy was trying to use qualitative and also quantitative. Perhaps he never, and he also has an interview because interviews are very important, especially when you are conducting your PhD. But you don't go and collect information from the interview until you are through with analyzing these questionnaires. I think you are getting me the procedure. Don't go and conduct interview before you have done analysis for your quantitative component of the questions. Because when you go there, you are armed with the responses from the quantitative. What you need to do is go and ask questions to bring justification to the particular questions in the questionnaire. That is the essence of the interview. So I find that majority of the respondents were female. When I go to the interview, and remember, I'm doing what you call key informant interviews. Specifically, I'm dealing with people who are well, highly informed. The best people in that particular community to give me answers. They're the ones I'm going to deal with. When I go to them, I must be able to ask them, why is it that in these your groupings, majority are female? Then they will tell me how the genesis of female came about in terms of even a story, and why female dominance is the status quo of what is in my quantitative part. So that particular answer, I come and I add it with the response of where female was seen to be the majority. So just I bring justification to the quantitative part using what you call the interview or focus group discussions. I'm so much interested in getting into the depth of this particular finding. And I can never do that if I don't behave that particular way. That's why I have to analyze this first until I'm done with all the analysis here. Then I go where? I go to the field to conduct interview. Interview, I will not do it to so many people. I may even take something like 12 key informants or 10 key informants. Then I record all their statements. And specifically, statements that are going to justify for me, even the level of education. If I find the level of education, majority of them, people have highly gone to school, I need to go to the field to investigate. Why is that majority of people have highly learned in this particular community? They will tell me the genesis of who was behind this education of everyone. I come and add it here to this particular findings where level of education was. I'm interested in who is like the person who was spearheading and how has that particular culture of embracing education has been passed from generation to generation in that particular community. To an extent that if now I'm giving everyone a questionnaire to fill for me in the community, I'm realizing that everyone is a postgraduate. How comes? It's not unrealistic. How? So that is a unique finding. And therefore, remember my study, someone else is waiting for it so that they can copy exactly what is happening here. They want to adopt. Yes, because what is happening here is good. It should be used as a lesson to other people outside there. And that's why I have to be as much comprehensive as possible to justify those particular responses through quantitative analysis. Quantitative analysis, and remember, when, like, for instance, for those people who have been here with us, with Dr. Rasak, yeah, you see the justification, even drawing models of quantitative to add it with this. It's very, very important. Okay, so I don't know, because I really wanted to show you this, but it's like I have to postpone it to tomorrow first class because I'm seeing most of you are leaving the class now, so we can stop at that level. I wanted to show you how we are going to do reliability using this particular data set and how we can do what we call validity only with the questions that are Likert scale. So that you will see, like in these questions, you will see this, some of the questions here went to the field, but they ought to have not, if at all this process was done. So those particular questions, I will relate them here, so that I only remain with what will contribute to me answering the objectives of the study. Okay, so we can be able to stop at that level, can pick from tomorrow. Yes. Any question, please, apart from that? Any question? So exactly now, that's why the person was asking about, is it necessary for us to conduct pilot? You are going to see with exactly when we read tomorrow, when I'm going to scrutinize these questions one by one, you will see the need for pilot. Yeah, because now I'm going to investigate the questions this particular gentleman put there in the questionnaire. Were they all necessary that we must take them to the field to be filled by the respondents? The test we are going to do is going to reveal, yeah, because there's what we call inter-item correlation. Now, the rule of thumb is any correlation that is below 0.5, delete those particular questions. Any correlation with above 0.5, factorial analysis, actually we are going to do factorial analysis. So any factors analysis will be greater than 0.5, we retain those particular questions. And you will see these particular questions with the lower than 0.5. When they are removed, you will find even as we're going to do what you call a correlation, the answers becomes better. If it was non-significant, the answer now becomes significant. It simply means we have just improved the quality level of the questions that we gave to the field there. We are now using the objectives. We are going to meet our specific objectives because we have improved the quality level of the questions that we are taking to the field. And immediately we collect this particular data. When you begin analysis now will reduce errors. We'll have lower reduced errors, and we can now give our reports very well. Yeah. And that's why you are saying this stage, this process is very important for any research that you do, even if it is for those needy. But then, if it is NGO, the difference is here. NGOs may not set most of their questions in Likert scale. That is another thing, Tammy, that NGOs may not set their questions in Likert scale. They emphasize so much about the indicators, which are standard indicators from the UN for UNDP. They take their indicators there, where they check their questions there. So if that is the case, that they are not assessing things like quality, they are not assessing agreement, level of agreement. Yes, if the questions are not Likert scale, then we don't do this software thing called testing for reliability and validity. The validity can only be tested in that case using expert opinion, where you take the particular questionnaire to other experts so that they can do what you call edit the questions. At the same time, they can be able to confirm the questions versus the standard which are existing in that particular field. That is why sometimes we are saying that, especially if you are a student, then you need to have one expert in your area, because that particular expert in your area know the existing theories in your area. And therefore, remember, all these are trying to question about the theories. So if I'm using a theory which is not relevant, you can be able to guide me, tell me now, okay, this theory is not appropriate in this context. Please, can you change to this ABC? Yeah. So thank you so much for that. That becomes perhaps the end of our presentation. Until tomorrow, God bless you all.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Peter.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Bye. So we can